Okay, everybody, welcome back. It's a new year of Swedenborg and life. Thanks for joining us. Our topic today is what does prayer do? And our discussion points will be the nature and aim of prayer, the influx, and we'll ask what should we pray for? So the idea is that there is a God, this infinite, omnipotent force that created and sustains everything. But this God is almost like a person. God can know us, can care about us, can intentionally affect our lives. God can understand human concepts and language. So naturally the question arises, what happens if we talk to God? And prayer is a huge part of the world's faith traditions and is used in all kinds of different ways, but the concept of it brings up some questions. For example, some people assert that if you pray to God, God will do good things for you, heal your diseases, bring you wealth. But what happens then with people who pray, but they stay sick? Why didn't God heal them? It can also be a little strange to think that we could change God's plan. Does that mean that we could know better than God how things should go? I mean, if there was a better move, shouldn't God, with his unlimited love and intelligence, already have made it? So what is prayer and what does it really do? Stay tuned. All right, we're here. It's 2015. They said this show wouldn't last until 2015. Nobody really said that. People are generally pretty friendly. Appreciate you guys as an audience. I'm glad to move into the new year with you. My name is Curtis with the Swedenborg Foundation, and as always, we're trying to get Swedenborg's concepts and ideas out into the conversation in the hopes that those conversations can do some good. Today, my guests are Chuck Blair and Peter Rhodes. Peter is the author of Observing Spirit, and Chuck is senior pastor at New Church Live. Thanks for coming on the show again, you guys.
Great to be here.
Great to start out the new year with you. You're both great people, and I'm looking forward to hearing everything that comes out of your mouth today in the next hour. All of you at home can contribute to the conversation as well. Type in your questions, your comments, that kind of thing. We have the second half of the show is going to be answering your live questions. So get those in now, and then we'll get to them then. But for now, let's start our discussion with our first segment. All right, so we're calling part one the nature and the aim of prayer. And this topic for this show, what does prayer do, came from somebody on the web who so we do want to do something on prayer from a Swedenborgian perspective. What does Swedenborg say about it? And he has some interesting things to say, so I thought we could get into some of them. Let's take a look at the first quote that I have here. This is from Secrets of Heaven 2535. Regarded in itself, praying is talking with God, while taking an inward view of the things we are praying about. In answer, we receive a similar stream of speech into the perceptions or thoughts of our mind, so that our inner depths open to God in a way. The experience varies depending on our mood and the nature of the subject we are praying about. If we pray from love and faith and focus on or seek only what is heavenly and spiritual, something resembling a revelation emerges while we pray. It discloses itself in our emotions in the form of hope, comfort, or an inward stirring of joy. So I'm going to open it up right away. Peter, what do you get out of that? What do you feel like he's sort of saying about the nature of prayer?
Well, for me, it's like you were saying, it's an inward experience. And I can say, yes, I do talk to God, even in language. Mm-hmm. But a lot of my communication with God is similar to my communication with a grandchild. You show them affection, you care for them. There's a loving communication. It's a communication.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a verbal communication. Mm-hmm. And what I get back is also, in some ways, verbal, but it starts more, like he says, as a feeling. Mm-hmm. And it often is addressed to a question that I've been struggling with, a theological type of question or spiritual type of question. And then a feeling starts, and then it starts to clarify into a thought, and then into an answer. Mm-hmm. So it's a two-way conversation, but it isn't.
Is this sort of during your experience of when you set aside some time?
Yeah, my morning meditation a lot. I mean,
right.
I do speak to God all day long, verbally. I think that's a lot more for me than, God doesn't need it. It's sort of like a little child running around with his little blankie.
Yeah.
And it's sort of make sure my dad's still there, oh, yeah, he's still there.
Yeah.
So I do that a lot.
Cool. Chuck, how does that all strike you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed what Peter shared there. For me, it's so much like breath now, where I used to think of prayers as being a highly formal thing, but I've really come to enjoy more informal prayers, where prayer just is conversation with God. I think that's what Swedenborg was driving at, and it's the normalcy of it. It's just a normal thing to have a conversation, and that running kind of conversation with God. And a lot of the time for me, frankly, what I work on with prayer is not thinking. Is actually sort of quieting my mind and just allowing, what Swedenborg talks about there, those intuitive forms of wisdom that I think is how God speaks to us a lot of the time, to allow those to sort of rise to the top.
Yeah, the process he's describing there and what you guys are describing is really sort of and what I think is his main message about the function of prayer is this: it's really you're opening yourself up. Right. I mean, you're going into this like I'm talking or making some, but really what you're doing is acknowledging there is an outside something, and so that kind of softens the channels, and then you just kind of, and it's interesting that there, because we do have this larger conversation about, okay, so I'm praying on Mercedes, I'm praying on Mercedes. I got to get that, you'll find some, but what he's talking about there is what you get from the prayer is not a change in what's happening, but it's inward, as he puts it, like consolation, joy, or what you're talking about, Peter. I have a question I don't understand. You start to get some kind of insight or wisdom, and I think that's what I see sort of Swedenborg's view on the whole thing being, is that this is about changing what's going on inside you and the kind of things you can get. So, and I have one other short little quote that kind of goes along with that. Is he's talking, this is jumping right in the middle of something he's talking about praying. The prayer is to be a request that the Lord may have mercy on us, give us the power to resist the evils that we have repented of, and provide us an inclination and a desire to do what is good. So look at the kind of things that he's asking for there. That's a little bit different than a Mercedes, right, Pete?
Yeah. Being a person in recovery, we have a lot of prayers, and basically it starts out with a recognition that we're powerless over whatever our addiction is. There's a higher power, and the third step is to surrender to him, and then ask for his help to do for you what you can't do for yourself. Stay away from alcohol or whatever it is. So there is a turning to God who has the power to do what you can't do. I also include, and it's often included in the prayers, but not my will, thy will be done. Even if that means you have to continue to drink for a while to get the real message you need. I'm not telling God, help me not drink, as if he didn't know what I really need in relation to my addiction. So shocked. So it's much more opening me to God and my recognition that he has the power to do that. So it's really not only open my heart, but also in humility asking for that help, but not asking for the help if that's not his will,
Yeah, and really, this sort of just the acknowledgement, okay, that there is, I need help. I mean, that you're sort of winning by doing it, Yeah. Chuck, did you have other thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking as Peter was speaking, so much too gets to, do we see God as unconditionally loving or conditionally loving? Because I think sometimes with prayer, we can think, if I say the right prayer, I have the right words, that I'll be able to get this Mercedes or heal something. And that's based on the idea that there's a conditionally loving God who's up there testing us to see if we pray right.
You're making a pitch.
You're making a pitch. That's right.
I'll double your money if you invest now.
Right. And yet, to me, it's about really being open to the unconditional love of God. And Swedenborg talks about a new will and new understanding. And to me, what that means is compassion and insight. And we can open ourselves to those more and more. And in those prayers will always go answered.
Yeah, so introspective, working on yourself. And I think we're going to get more into this in the next two sections. So let's move to segment 2 right now. So that's an actual photograph of the Influx. No, I don't know. We got it on the web. But it looks cool. It looks sort of like what he's talking about here. And so what is the Influx? We're going to take a look at. Swedenborg is writing about an experience we had with praying. This is again from Secrets of Heaven. Whenever I have read the Lord's Prayer, and the Lord's Prayer, when he's talking about, that's the Christian, Our Father who art in the heavens, I have had a clear sensation of being raised up toward him by a sort of magnetism. My mind was then receptive, which brought about contact with certain communities in heaven. I was aware of the Lord's inflow into every word of the prayer, and therefore into every single thought sparked in my mind by the prayer's message. This inflow did not occur the same way one time as another, but in indescribably varied ways, which showed how infinite the contents of each detail was. It also showed that the Lord was present in all the details. So that being put in touch in the mind with heaven kind of reminds me, Peter, of what you were saying about, I have some kind of question and I'll start to pray about it, and I start to get more and more insight. And from Swedenborg's perspective, that would be we're linking up more with heaven and with God through heaven, right?
Yeah, I also feel it. It's a lifting up, that experience he was talking about, being lifted.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that if I'm in a state of resentment or anger,
right,
there's a miscommunication with someone I really love. I am powerless over those loves of self and loves of the world in me. And it is hell for me. And when I remember to turn to God and ask for that help and then open my mind, there have been times when I actually nearly physically feel a lifting out of that heavy, hateful state. And it's just so good. Just to be that I'm not that state, that I'm in that state, but I'm not that state, and then God starts to lift me out. He doesn't always do that. Maybe sometimes it's better I stay in that state for longer to learn more. Yeah. But when he does, it is that experience that he was talking about, as being lifted up.
It's sort of like a subtle miracle, and only if I've been in a place where, because we were talking about before, this has got to be something outside me. If I've been in a place where I've completely been unable to get out of a state like that, and maybe, that's intentionally that I couldn't, and I've felt that, like, I just can't move this boulder. Like, there's nothing I can do. Then, when I do get lifted out another time, I can see, wow, okay, I've been there and not been, so there's another element at play here that wasn't here before. So I feel like that's something that you kind of can pick up through kind of both of those experiences. And yeah, I like that image of being lifted up. So Chuck, did you have?
Yeah, that lifting up, just even this morning, I was working through some challenges, and I love just the biblical phrase, be still and know that I'm God, right? Because just that being still is, and as soon as I can say that to myself, oh yeah, this is God saying this, just be still. Mm-hmm. Just a very simple prayer of just be still. And when I can say that, I can feel my spirit just being raised into a much easier place where there's not frenetic activity, where I'm not like trying to do, I'm not trying to push the river, so to speak. Mm-hmm. I'm just much more at peace, regardless of what the external circumstances are.
Yeah, and thinking about, okay, so we say, this is God doing this, and that God is love and wisdom. We were talking about this on a previous show, and just sort of this, that you're connecting to pure love and pure. So it's not like God is someone who's like, I'll say this. Oh no, I shouldn't have said this. I say that. This is something you can connect with personally, but it's also this like permanently, perfectly acting. So it's you're connecting to something that we're describing a little tip of it, but it's much more complex than that. So I don't know. For some reason, that struck me as an interesting sort of little aspect of the whole thing of what we're really plugging into there. So we have one more topic. Let's get to it now and we'll wrap this up. So what should we pray for? What's effective, okay, somebody honked at me today, please give them a flat tire, something like that. It feels like there's a plenty of room for barking up the wrong tree there. And I sort of see from what we've talked about earlier, this kind of it's almost like a realignment thing. It's like a compass thing, okay, I'm remembering that there's God, and God is love and love has power, and that can help. So it's sort of like a realignment type thing. That's part of the function of it. But what kind of things do we ask for that really, where you're using the system to its maximum potential? So I have a couple of quotes from Swedenborg about it here. The first one is from Revelation Unveiled. He who knows anything of the Lord's coming and of the new heaven and the new church, thus of the Lord's kingdom, should pray that it may come, and that he who desires truth should pray that the Lord may come with light. And then this is a segment from an earlier quote we just had on this show. If we pray from love and faith and focus on or seek only what is heavenly and spiritual. I just want to bring that back in because he's sort of, heavenly and spiritual, these are technical terms within Swedenborg's work, but it has to do with things that heavenly is, these are levels moving closer to God, God being love for the whole human race, desire to help the whole human race. And I included the top one about wanting the Lord's kingdom to come, that meaning, that connection between and God and us in everybody's individual lives, So I just put those up there to show, like, okay, the kind of things you're asking for are states of mind, are feelings, that kind of thing, right? So Chuck, what are your first thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that idea that it's states of mind, because I find it very powerful to pray for other people. There's another Swedenborgian quote where Swedenborg says, God really listens to prayer when we pray for other people. And I try again, like, I think we have to steer away from the idea of a conditionally loving God, and I'm certainly not in the position of God. So my prayers aren't conditional when I do that. They're just praying for people to feel that peace and comfort of God. And that can be an active form of prayer. I mean, one of the ones I really enjoy, a quote I think of a lot with prayer, was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And he was marching with Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama. And he said, "My legs were praying." Yeah. And I love that idea that there can even be a kinesthetic element to it, an incarnational element.
There's a Swedenborg quote, we are continually at prayer when we live a life of kindness, if not with our mouth, then with our hearts, or something like that. Yeah. So that's a great one. Pete, did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're praying thy kingdom come. As an individual, I'm really asking for your will to become my will, and your thoughts to become my thoughts. So we're asking for a conjunction. So we're going from a duality type relationship. I'm praying to you, right, to may I become one with you, so that my life is a continuous prayer. How I live, my feet when they're walking are walking for you. And I think we're heading that direction. That's what we're looking towards. So there isn't a God that's apart from us, but the God who, our very life is God's life, our very love is from his love, and our wisdom is from him. And then our life becomes an extension of his, and it is a prayer in everything we do.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and isn't that sort of the inner meaning of that statement in the Bible, that there will be no temple there? And I think it's another passage that neither will one say to another, "No God," because everybody's going to know. Right. Just kind of we're living it, we're experiencing it. So anyway, awesome stuff, you guys. I think it's about time for us to get to questions. So if we're ready, all right, we'll take a quick video break, and then we're going to get to your thoughts and feelings from the audience. Okay, all right, we're back. It's time for the lightning round, live questions. If you're just joining us, think of some questions, write them down, and we'll get them. Or if it's after the show, just write them, and we'll try to address them some other day. Okay, so this is our first one we're going to get to. This is from YouTube. M. Christina, great quote from Secrets of Heaven. Does this represent the fact that Swedenborg may have engaged in repetitive prayer with focused intent as a form of meditation? It's a great question. I know that he would often in his journal of spiritual experiences write, like in other places, I was meditating on the so-and-so. If he has some story about engaging with the spiritual world, he'll start, I was meditating on the concept of something. And it does seem like, also when I was searching through his writings on the computer to find stuff about prayer, he'd often mention the Lord's Prayer. I was thinking this, and you see in those quotes, he was like, it varied every time I did it. So it seems like he's indicating that there's some kind of repetitive prayer element there. But do you guys have anything to add to that?
I don't have any memory of him speaking about like a mantra, repetitive prayer. I know there are people who do the Lord's Prayer repetitively for years in a row. So I personally don't have any experience, if that's what they're referring to, that repetitive prayer. Praying, yes, but repetitive prayer, I don't remember.
People will say the Lord's Prayer over and over for 4 years in a row. Yeah. I did just watch this documentary on, we're just going to go on a tangent. I watched this documentary on PBS. It was about somebody who did this pilgrimage to this one part of India. They were having this big, huge festival there. And there was a guy who had his arm up, and he had it up for 5 years. But before that, he'd been lying on his side for they said like 20 years. So that's a long prayer. Chuck, do you have any thoughts on the Swedenborg prayer question?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly, what Pete said, not sure exactly all the forms that he used, but I think like the spiritual disciplines, any of them will really work, because I think the part of a repetitive prayer, for me, when I use those prayers or use a word in a contemplative prayer format, is really just to quiet my mind.
Yeah.
It's to sort of distract my reptilian brain with a bright, shiny quarter and it quiets me.
Yeah, you must have told me. You have a pet monkey, and you get a pole out in your yard, and the monkey's running up and down the pole, and you're like, "What'd you do that for?" It's to keep him out of the kitchen. I'm sure.
That's what the mantra was.
Yes, exactly. And I'll repeat phrases. I find that very powerful, because you just sort of don't engage with your head world and stuff. So, all right, in the beginning we were talking about the question, so I give us like 6 out of 10.
I don't think we had an answer.
Yeah. That's to cover up the lack of an answer. Thanks, M. Christina, for that question. Let's get to our next one. This is from X Jones on YouTube. Many people feel that God is guiding them to do things that don't quite line up with spiritual teachings. Does Swedenborg have any advice on distinguishing between his guidance via prayer and other voices or feelings we may have that are not from God? Yeah, man. If you watch, there's all kinds of shows about cult leaders. People who say, "Oh, God told me that, you got to leave your husband and come to me," or "God told me you guys got to give me all your money." You'll definitely see that a lot. So I think that's a great question. And Chuck, did you want to start off?
That is a really good question. And you do see that all the time in the news. And I think with prayer, God's going to move more through us in terms of our states than a particular thing. Like, he's not going to tell me what the right lottery number to play is. He's not going to tell me leave your wife. It's moving more of an internal thing with hope and peace and joy, and love, and that's where the movement really is. So I'd be really suspicious if I was praying and all of a sudden, God came to me and said what the next lottery number was. I don't think I'd buy it.
Specifics, the courses that Swedenborg was really, really plugged in. Like, he could hear the spiritual world all the time, and yet this prayer that he's describing is just like, I got hope, and I got consolation, those kinds of things that you were talking about, these specific directives, those are worldly sort of things. And so you can God is love for the whole human race and wisdom. So anyway, Pete, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the question brings up an interesting point for me. If you take the letter of the word as a direct meaning rather than the spirit of the word, there's a different relationship. Often I may receive an internal answer to a prayer that sounds different than my understanding of the letter of the word. And I go back to the woman who was caught in adultery, and they refer to Leviticus, she should be stoned. Jesus didn't go back and say, but there's other numbers that says she shouldn't be. He didn't go to the letter. He just said, the first one among you who hasn't sinned, stone her. He goes to the spirit of the law and doing a loving thing. He's not searching through Leviticus to find out what's right and what's wrong. So there is a funny relationship between our old understanding, our what we call historical faith or derived doctrine, and sometimes what comes to me leads me contrary to that, but it's never in the direction against anybody. It's always in the direction, there's this quote, "What would love do?" Yeah. It always is a loving act, but it enlightens the nature of the old law. You've heard that hath been said, but I say unto you. So I wouldn't necessarily shy away from it just because it seems to be leading from your old understanding of the letter of the word. So,
right. So, generally Swedenborg is all about, and you can just tell the way humans operate, rationality. Like, we have rationality for a reason. Step back, think about this kind of message that you're getting, and other people. Like, the reason we can look at, what it was, Jonestown or whatever, and say, like, that wasn't legit because, legit things don't end up getting everybody killed and have all this scandal in them. So if you're thinking about God as, just the more you kind of have a sense of what God is, this love and wisdom that we're talking about. And at the best, it's your best guess. So if you're getting messages to do something that's going to harm people, man, I'd really vet that.
Well, the truth, it says the truth and good can join and bring you closer. And if I come up with some really good proof that my wife is wrong in regard to something, does that bring me closer? No, then it's not really true.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just keep my mouth shut and I don't have to necessarily, talk about my feelings or my boundaries, but that gives her space to move closer and me closer to her, then that's probably a good influx to trust.
Right. So those are a few of our thoughts. Thanks. That was a very, very good question. Let's go for number 3. Drive By Poet on YouTube. What does Swedenborg say about self-deception? I would say that deception, falsity, self-deception would be believing something that's not true or intentionally. That's a huge part of his worldview. Is that you were just saying that good and truth go together, Peter, and he's saying the opposite, evil and falsity, go together. So. And the way that his cosmology sort of works, there's like the human race is all kind of interconnected, and all the good parts of us is heaven, as he would call it, and all the bad parts is hell. So everybody, whenever we're going into some kind of harmful behavior or something, we always have rationalizations and justifications that make that palatable, and allow us to like, okay, I like it now. Can I get some permission from myself to do it? So. It's real, and people can get really, really bogged down in that. And you don't even gotta be looking in books to know that people can deceive themselves. But yeah, Chuck, did you have a?
Oh boy, that's another great question. The way I see Swedenborg holding self-deception is I think it is something we have to be really careful of. And just a simple prayer of like, God, give me your eyes to see this. I do a lot of work with couples, and I really try to stress that. When a spouse comes in and they're all upset, it's been a bad day at work, and they throw stuff down and they're just all grumpy, and you can look at that with your eyes or my eyes and see a certain thing, make judgments, all kinds of crazy stuff, where I can just be in that peaceful place. Okay, God, just let me breathe. Please give me your eyes to see this. And it changes the whole way you see it. I feel like and oftentimes I think this is a trick with self-deception. Self-deception often is my first reaction. Yeah. It's usually, I don't try not to trust my first reaction.
It's everybody's first
reaction. Number two is usually better.
Well, they call it the fundamental attribution error. That in that situation, my spouse is coming in, throwing stuff on the ground because they're a jerk. But if I was doing that, it'd be like, well, I just had a long day, and there's good reasons why I'm doing it. And so what you're saying, this like look from God's perspective, is look from the objective, truthful perspective. Right. That if you had the same factors, you'd probably be acting. Or even if you wouldn't, the fact that they're doing it, it's just what it is to be a person. You're doing things, and sometimes you can help it, sometimes you can't. So very, very good. Peter, did you have further thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my reading of Swedenborg, 99% of my time I'm in self-deception.
Yeah, congrats on that, point one.
Anytime Gurdjieff says anything that you do intuitively with no effort is a deception. It comes with no effort, no thought. It comes through your inherited love of self and love of the world. So I would even go further. When I'm thinking, I'm in self-deception. If I'm thinking words, it's usually forms of my love of self and love of the world forming into thoughts, into actions, and it's about me. And that's a deception. The world's not about me. So when we talk about quieting the mind and opening the mind to the influx, Richard Rohr calls it a downflowing. We're asking to push that self-deception aside so that we can actually have a reception. So if I'm thinking about anything and think I have an answer, I've deceived myself. I don't have the answer because I only have a very pinpoint, personalized, finite perspective, which can't possibly comprehend the infinite perspective from which everything's coming from.
Yeah.
So I think this I know nothing, and Swedenborg voices that in many different ways.
Yeah.
It's finally coming to that. No, I don't know anything, but God can use my brain to accomplish a lot of things. But when I think my brain knows something, I'm in trouble.
Because you never have all the details. You can sort of think like, people on this road are like this, but you don't know all those particular people. You don't know all the instances. You don't know all the factors. And so, and I think about how Swedenborg says that, God can perfect the human mind to eternity. Right. That we're not, we have, you could always be lifting the veil of self-deception, and there always will be more. Right. But the good news is there's progress, and you can have fun while you're doing it, and God wants us to live with almost like a healthy deception. Mm-hmm. Meaning like this feels like it's just you, but I'm working with you, so here's a life, grab it as a gift. Anyway, great question. Let's take a look at another one. This is from Dave on YouTube. I see praying for outcomes as something to avoid. I try to pray to do God's will and the next right thing. So thanks for sharing that, Dave. And I do kind of feel like, yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get, I mean, what's the difference, from between praying to God and just like trying to go out there and do, I mean, you're just trying to impose your will on the world and on other people. But this, okay, can I please learn more about the truth that we all share life? It does seem like that's kind of the way to go.
Yeah.
I think part of, if my will really is thy will and my will become one, are we in a mix?
Yeah.
Then the only prayer which I've heard and I've experienced myself is thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm not judging your world and I'm not judging my life and I'm not judging other people's lives. It's far beyond my comprehension. I am just very thankful to be feeling a part of this. And I'm no longer asking that you know something you don't know or do something because I'm a little smarter than you, or could you give me some special attention?
Yeah.
It's just no. Your will is creating reality. I get to experience being in that reality as part of that reality. Thank you. It's quite a ride,
Mm-hmm. Gratitude, underrated.
Yeah,
Chuck.
As Pete was saying, I was thinking of Anne Lamott's great book, Help, Thanks, Wow, and she said those are the only three prayers we have. Just help, and then God shows
Help,
up,
thanks,
and it's
wow, that's funny.
and then the thanks part is He's going to show up in ways that we can't imagine. I mean, it just is going to be, and our job is to be curious and open to that, willing to observe, and then we can have the wow experience of just realizing literally the awesomeness of God, and His holding of the whole thing, that everything fits and everything belongs. I think Swedenborg drives at that again and again. Like, there is no off the path. We're always on the path.
And I think you could have this conversation from a secular perspective, and just what we're describing with spiritual terminology is what people talk about, trying to get around your ego and sort of work on it. So, it's just interesting to kind of, I see a lot of concepts in Swedenborg when I was, in courses I've studied on psychology, that kind of stuff. There's very much crossover, and all these different programs. Right. Everybody knows about the struggle we're talking about. Everybody knows about trying to not be small and petty about things and trying to be aware and awakened. So I think it's just good to just note that this is something that's a pretty universal human experience to understand, okay, there's something we need to get past, and then there's a bigger perspective out there. So, all right, we're going to do 3 more, and then we'll wrap it up. This is from Question on YouTube. Giving is usually good. It's helping your fellow man, but it can be enabling. It makes me feel there are few absolute truths. Are there any absolute truths? There are 4 absolute truths. No, I don't know. Yeah. Is there anything that would tell you how to act in a situation that could never be affected by anything? It'd be hard to think of those. You're always, and Swedenborg talks about what he calls, in an old translation, discriminate charity, or like you think what's really helping the person. You had mentioned in the beginning, Pete, like if you're struggling with some kind of like alcohol addiction or something like that, you could, at one point it would be like, oh yeah, well, you want another drink? I'll get you one, because that's helping, right? However, that's not really helping in the long term. So there certainly is, wisdom, love and wisdom have to go together.
Yeah.
So.
Well, for me, absolute truth for me is that God is infinitely loving, infinitely wise, and omnipotently powerful, and that He is the all and everything. And that no matter what the appearance is, there's nothing that's not a manifestation of His will. If you take out a particular time and a particular small aspect of that, it can look terrible. Bill Wilson is drinking again, lost his job, and so forth.
Yeah.
But if you had the viewpoint of God from eternity to eternity, then it would be good. And so I just take that as a truth. That God is God for a reason. He's not CEO. He's not very powerful. He is all powerful, all loving, and all wise. Yeah. And that everything that is a creation of His. My understanding of it is very limited. But that's the foundation for me that I take as an absolute truth. Other people may not believe any of those things. But that would be an absolute truth that I take and operate from.
Yeah, I'm going to change my initial answer because now I'm going to wipe out my initial answer because not necessarily absolute truth like you never slam the door in somebody's face or something like that. But these things that God knows more about this than I do right now. God is bringing good out of this situation, regardless. Those are absolute truths.
Yeah.
that that you could add others along that line. And those are the ones that I come to, because when I'm navigating the woods of my mind, and there's all these fears and these kinds of things are coming at me, it's those absolute truths that that are the light, that are the saving thing. And they're like, okay, whatever this is, I'll even say, like, I'll have these little mantras that, like, I will fear no evil or something like that. So, this is going to turn out all right in the end, that kind of stuff. So for those sorts of things, I guess that those are the absolute truths, that we're going to get through this would be an absolute truth. Chuck?
I was thinking, as Pete was saying that, I mean, to me, I think it's so informative too to think of the difference between a compass and a map. And a compass point can be that understanding that God is love, infinitely loving, it all belongs, that question, what would love do? Those are true north. And I think where we get kind of bollocksed up with absolute truth is if I believe that Pete's map is the same as my map, is the same as your map. It's not. All our maps are different, but that doesn't mean we can't agree on what true north is. And that's a very generic thing, but you think about how significant just that simple agreement that there is a true north, what that could be in our lives.
And because we're like, second graders in like in a like pharmaceutical, like a really, really intense laboratory setting where we're like, oh no, you have to do that. We're trying to get really specific. We don't know. And when people get into saying you have to believe this, you have to act, all these things that cause these problems, we're trying to have this precision in there that I don't know if we're necessarily qualified.
Yeah, you can have the one, well, if you don't know, ask the teacher before you put the two chemicals together. That would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So in the 12-step recovery, if you don't know, should I give this guy a drink or should I tell him he has to leave my house? I don't know. So I want to work the steps and get to what? Step 11. I pray only for the knowledge of your will for me and the power to carry that out. So the absolute truth is I don't know, and the absolute truth for me is God does know, and I'm asking if he could lend some of his knowledge to me so that I do his will, not my will. And it may be different one day than it is the next day because people are different.
Yeah. Oh, and you get 16 points for bringing that back to prayer, for our theme for the day. And asking for those are the kinds of things, you're asking for a prayer. Can I just know, and not like, can I get this thing, so it's great. All right, let's get to our last two questions here. This is from Nancy on Facebook. So this is where I see the importance of meditation, because our thoughts keep us separate. Also, I see the importance of prayer as reminding us who is boss, and that is not us. And I find that to be a great statement. And when it says, like, who is boss, it's not us. If it was like a person we're talking about, some other person, it'd be like, wait, why is this person bossing everyone? But it's such a relieving statement, the idea that God is in charge. And I think that you can only I come to see that as like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Only after having it lived through a bunch of life, and you're just like, wow, I do not want to be driving this, and all the things that attack you in life are going, like, accusing you of being the one in control, and so this idea of, okay, so remember there's a higher power. To me, that's liberating. It doesn't feel at all like I'm like, no, please come, you I want to learn, rather than like, okay, nobody tells me what to do.
Right.
Yeah, I think when I first started as a child to look at religion, I thought God was trying to take away my will and impose his will, and he didn't want what I want for me. So, but now I see that, I hope he can take my will away. I've lived long enough with my will that when he says, come unto me, all ye who are heavily burdened, and I'll give you rest, it's exactly what he means. The burden he's going to take from me is me. Yeah. And I need a rest from that guy. He's crazy.
Yeah. Like you're fun to hang out with, but this is just a little too much. All right, Chuck.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. How many times when we do act out, we're like, I just wasn't myself. And we say that, like, what part of us knows that? Well, I think that's where prayer again comes in, just that settling on, just push that aside and God take it. I love the quote, there's good news and better news, and the good news is there is a Messiah, and the better news is it's not you.
Yeah. It's cool.
And that responsibility of actually thinking you have to know and you have to make the right choice, and you could make the wrong choice, and that could be detrimental for you and others to eternity and all that. That's a heavy burden, and we take that on thinking that we have intelligence and we have freedom to choose, and those choices could affect us eternally. To be relieved of that is, no, I'm God within you. I'm directing your life. I'm directing all life. And if I should lift up any to me, if I be lifted up, I'll lift all people to me. The message is, you're not in charge, and I'm not going to let you screw it up because you're so finite and so ignorant. Why would I give you a responsibility you can't handle? But I do allow you to learn. I use the example of playing basketball with a grandchild. It looks like he beat me in basketball.
Yeah. I remember being a lot better when I was a little kid. I used to beat everyone. Then something happened when I got into high school. All right, so I think we have one more. Yeah, let's get to our last one here. Christopher on YouTube. What does Swedenborg say about God's will? Does God will that particular events happen, or is God's will just anything motivated by goodness? How does one know how to act in accord with God's will? Thanks, Christopher. I think that's a great question, and there's one that I ask myself if I'm kind of trying to say, all right, the life plan I'm buying into is I'm trying to open more and more to the divine, and I'm trying to live in what Swedenborg would call the divine design. So whatever that means. So it's Saturday, it's 1:00 in the afternoon. What do I do right now? What do I do? So I would say, and I want to hear what you guys have to say. Providence. Swedenborg says providence is in everything. So even the roll of a dice, nothing is happening outside of God's providence. So in that way, God is involved in all events. It gets dicey when you say like, oh, so does that mean God killed this person, God killed that person? The purpose of it all is eternal happiness. And the way Swedenborg talks about it, there are times when the road to eternal happiness is painful, and it seems like he talks about God willing, God allowing, and God permitting, or something like there's these different levels. The end purpose is still done, but I think that's sort of signifying things are happening in more painful ways than initially love would like us to have to go through, and that's with the complexity of the world as it is and people as they are. As far as what do you do? I'll let you guys answer that.
Well, I think, and there's probably a reason they didn't let me go to theological school here.
Yeah.
This might be it. I think God's will is. There's not a duality. God has a will, and then he carries it out. He thinks, and so it becomes. So what's God's will? That you just drank that water, that I'm talking,
yes.
that we're here.
I could feel it when I drank the water.
So that's what God's will is, because he's a creator, and the only thing is those things that he is creating. And he doesn't create and then leave and go play golf. He is creating all living at the moment. So his will and what is one. And it's a moving target. He's a verb. So what is never stays still. So what looks bad today, they have all those stories, it's good news or bad news. What looks like bad news today all of a sudden turns out to be good news. We don't know what's good and what's bad. That was the first sin, to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as if we're God. God said it's good, behold, very good. You just have to have a lot of patience and wait a long time to see the goodness that's going to be revealed through that. Meantime, you can trust, I trust, that divine providence is leading everything, and everything leads to a good end.
Yeah.
That kind of brings it back to the, praying and thy will be done.
Right.
That, okay, this is something I'd like, but if you have something better in mind, Chuck.
Yeah, I love the, I totally would agree with what Pete said. And God's will from a Swedenborgian's perspective on the biggest picture is a heaven from the human race. Mm-hmm. And in God's economy, does God win? Yeah, God wins. He's going to win. And our lives will have moments where maybe we don't see it, we don't feel it, we go through all kinds of blessings and breakings. But somehow, if we can stay in that place of thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. I do agree. And I think, when we die and people talk about seeing their life flash before their eyes, I think that must be part of it, right? Mm-hmm. Where all of a sudden you see all those connections, that thing that you just couldn't figure out. And all of a sudden you see how it's connected to a lot of other things that you never imagined.
That's my favorite part of near-death experiences.
Yeah.
People that see that. But so in case Christopher is thinking about, okay, but what tangibly, what can I do? I mean, it is something that I'm trying to figure out, as I said before. And I find that one of the reasons I'm here on this show called Swedenborg and Life, and because in Swedenborg's books I find the most specifics. I find and it's not like you get up and do 30 push-ups. It's more like the way that you're thinking. It's kind of what we've been talking about, thinking, trying to I did this video on the categories of love and prioritize. Swedenborg says there's love of the world, love of self, and love of heaven, or love of usefulness, and it's about prioritizing those. So if I'm thinking, okay, what motivation does this seem like? And you can only know what it seems like. What does it seem like I have here? Okay, and how can I kind of switch to how can I change my thought and feeling diet? If you're how can I identify what's a more healthy universal love and cultivate that? Can I do that? Can I try? You do your best. It's not like you're in total control, but I would say poke around in Swedenborg if you haven't already, and see if anything gets to you. Okay, so that's all the time we have for questions. I mean, we could go on, but we really got to wrap it up at some point, because I know that we're human beings and we have to sleep and do these kinds of things. So we're going to come back and just wrap it up with our correspondence meditation. So stick with us. All right, so we're back, and we're gonna do a segment that we do. So we've been talking about prayer is like this letting in of things. Life is about sort of letting in God. This correspondences thing we do is that. What we're doing is we're looking at. Swedenborg says that there's a symbolism in objects. So the physical world around us is telling us deeper things if we just know how to look at it. And so what we're going to try to do here is look at some things and open our minds hopefully in the right way and see what flows in. So today we're going to be looking at stones. And stones pop up as a common symbol for truth in Swedenborg's works. And I just wanted to kick it over to you guys. What do stones mean, spiritually to you guys? Chuck?
I love the idea of David and Goliath. That David picks out of the brook 5 smooth stones, and those are those stones. Those are just a few well-worn things that we really have come to know in our life at a deep level. And through that, we can do incredible things. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and when I talked before about how I have a little mantras that I do, I kind of got the idea for those from that story of the small stone. Okay, I just repeat this. So did you have thoughts on stones?
Yeah, I have a little cabin up in the Adirondacks, and there's a creek with stones and boulders, and they've all been smooth from years and years and years. There's one that's about 12 foot high and 12 foot long. It's just huge.
Wow.
And I call it my sobriety stone. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to be moved. Mm-hmm. And I feel that way. There's certain truths that, no, I'm not going to be moved. As a recovering alcoholic, you want a drink? No.
Yeah.
You sure? It is your daughter's anniversary, and it was only one drink. You really? No. Yeah. And that solidity. And if you hang around and play with big stones, there's just something, you can count on this guy. He's going to be here. Well,
so that's a great sort of description of what we're trying to do here with this correspondences thing, is that you're talking about a stone being a representation of this sort of mental or spiritual concept. And by learning about the physical thing, you can learn about the internal thing. How, you say a 12 foot by 12 foot stone, do you have any idea how heavy that is, how immobile that is, and by actually going up and trying to push it and experience it, you get a sense of that. So here, the best we can do is visual. We're going to show you some images of stone. So take a look at these with all this stuff we just said kind of in your mind, and just open yourself up and see what kind of thoughts and feelings come in. So as we were just talking about, actually you're getting hit by truth on a lot of levels, because Swedenborg says actually that water, light, and stones all symbolize truth in different ways. So you see them all together there. You see the action of the water rounding and smoothing those things. So could talk forever about that kind of stuff, but we're not going to do it tonight. We're just going to sign off. If you guys have enjoyed this show, consider supporting it and helping it to spread. You can make a tax-deductible donation to the nonprofit Swedenborg Foundation. Just open up the description, and you'll see a link there. Thanks for considering it. Chuck and Peter, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Super happy to kick off the new year with you, and we hope we can get you back sometime later, 2015. Everyone, we'll be back on Monday. See you then.